numbers.
Okay, so now we will jump into the live session, and I hope it works for most of you. And we structured our live session in 6 different pages, and we will go through them step by step. And these are also the Python files which you could find in the data folder within the folder that you all downloaded. Yeah, just one note at the beginning. We provided you with a slightly different version of these codes. And in your codes, there are also a bit more detailed examples, which we will not cover in full here, but you can feel free to discover them afterwards and also contact us if you have any questions about them. Second thing is that in our code, we commented everything out. So we put hashtags in front of everything so that we were able to show you only these things which we are currently presenting. And in your code, you haven't these comments. So when you run it, everything will automatically be executed. But you can also feel free to play a bit around with the code. And what's important is that if you make any changes in your code, then you don't have to start Streamlit again, but you can just save your changes by, for example, pressing Control and S, and then you can go to the dashboard again, and then click this rerun box on the top right of the dashboard, and then everything will automatically be updated. Okay, so let's start about how to bring some text to the dashboard. And the first function is to bring some title to our page. And we do this with the st.title function, which takes any string as an argument. And then this string will be printed as our title of the page. And there are some more functions that bring text to our page, which are the st.header function, the st.subheader function, the st.text function, and the st.caption function. And all of these functions work quite similar. They all take a string and then print it to the dashboard, but in different formats. One more function is the st.code function. And this function also takes some string as an argument. And then this will be printed like here in a format that looks like source code.
One question. So just to understand it correctly, you have one big like folder with all these Py files, and when you initiate the Streamlit, it will be automatically like for all of these Py files, there will be like some like tabs in the image, right?
Yeah, what Streamlit does when we run this Streamlit run data analytics.py file, then Streamlit will automatically look in this folder and sees, oh yeah, there's a file named pages, and then it will automatically jump in this pages file and also execute all of these different Py files.
So these pages should be like, it's a predefined standard name. Okay.
That is just one definition.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, and one last function to display text is the st.markdown function. And here we can put in any expression from the markdown language, and then this will automatically be displayed here in our customized format, for example, in bullet points or something that is printed in bold. One quite universal command to write any text to our dashboard is the st.write command, which can also take some string as an argument and prints this. But basically, you can give any Python object as an argument to this st.write function. For example, here, this a is in our case a number, and then this number will be printed here in a number format. Perhaps the most simple command to bring any text or any object on the dashboard is the so-called magic command. And what this command does is that it automatically recognizes if there is any plain variable or any plain string like here in our code, and then it will automatically print the string on our dashboard. And we can use this, for example, to first create a data frame, df, and then by simply writing the name of the data frame, this data frame will automatically be shown here in our dashboard. One more feature of Streamlit is that we can also insert images into our dashboard. And to do this, we first have to import PIL, which is a pre-installed library that enables us to open images. And we use this to first create an image variable, which takes an image that we have placed in the data folder. And after that, we can use the sd.image function and give this image as an argument to this function. And then the image will be displayed also in our dashboard. And optionally, we can also add a caption and the use column with equals true argument to that function. And what this use column with equals true argument does is that it automatically adjusts the size of the picture so that it's well aligned in our dashboard. And finally, there are some so-called status messages, which are basically info boxes with some information that are intended to guide the user a bit better through the code, through the dashboard. And there are basically four types of these message boxes, which can be rendered by these four functions. And each of these functions were quite similar. In all of these functions, we also insert some string, and we can also optionally insert an icon. And this will then be displayed in these four message boxes like this. Okay, so let's move on to the next session, where we'll discover how to display any data in our Streamlit dashboard. And in the following examples, we always use the Titanic data set from one of the prior lectures to illustrate our examples. So the first way to bring some data to the dashboard is the sd.table function, which takes only the respective data frame as an argument and then prints this data frame as a table like here. One second option to bring data to the dashboard is the sd.dataframe function, which also takes the data frame, the f, as a first argument, and then prints this data frame to the dashboard. And here we also have the opportunity to specify a width and a height, and we can also use this useContainer with equals true function, which in this case also ensures that the data frame is perfectly aligned in our dashboard. And one final feature here are so-called metrics. And a metric is basically one big number together with a description and a delta. And we can render such a metric using this sd.metric function, where the first argument is our description above, and the second argument is the value, and the third argument is optionally and is some delta that is shown below. So let's see how we can visualize all these data in charts in Streamlit. And what we did first here was to prepare some data sets. So first we created a data set which only includes the first 50 passengers of the whole Titanic data set, because this is more beautiful to view on the charts. And the second data preparation that we did was to create a distribution of the title in a similar way as we did it in one of the homeworks. So there are many charts in principle to many options in principle to print charts in Streamlit, and the most simple option are some Streamlit proprietary charts. And there are three charts that Streamlit has itself, which is first a line chart and also an area chart and a bar chart. And we can render all these charts in a quite similar way using the sd.linechart function, the sd.area chart function, and the sd.bar chart function. And all of these functions work also in a quite similar way. And they take the respective data frame as the first argument. The second argument is the column, which should be shown on the x-axis. And the second argument is the column or other columns that should be shown on the y-axis. And here we also have this useContainer with equals true function argument. Yeah. So this way we can also create these three types of charts, but to be a bit more flexible, we can also import charts from Matplotlib or from Seaborn. And to do this, we first create a Matplotlib figure in this case, and then we use the sd.pyplot function. And this function takes this Matplotlib figure or also a Seaborn figure as the first argument, and then simply plots this figure here in the dashboard. And finally, Streamlit is also able to integrate charts which were created from Plotly, as your group already presented. And here we can simply use the Plotly express function and create a simple Plotly figure. And then we can use the st.plotly chart function and insert this Plotly figure, and then we will have our Plotly figure here on the dashboard. Yeah, that's it from the charts, and now Alex will continue with some interactive parts.
Exactly, thank you, Samuel. So now we will have a look at our first interactive elements within Streamlit. And basically you're able to define a multitude of components that you can just add to your page, and the user is able to interact with it. And a first example of this would be, for example, a button, which can simply be defined by typing st.button into your Python code. And then on the web front end, there will be a button which can be pressed or not. And according to whether or not the user has pressed it, you can react to any change and render your dashboard accordingly. So for example, if the button is pressed, we will output that the button has been pressed. And if not, we just write that it has not been pressed yet. And you can see that this actually works. And once the code is being re-executed, you see a different message below. Also, we are able to add some sort of download button. So if a user wants to download the data frame that you've been working with, or you have changed anything and want to be able to download just the changed data, you're able to define a download button, which you can also pass a label into. Then you can pass any data into that you want to download. So basically, if we say data frame to CSV here, we're able to download our data as a CSV file. And in the back here, we are also able to define a file name to download it as. And if we now just update our page on the right, we can see that there's now a download data button. And if we press this, there will be a Titanic CSV file which can be downloaded and can be used by the user themselves. And now towards the more useful objects for dashboarding. So you're basically able to add checkboxes just by using st.checkbox. And you can basically give the user an option to check something or remove something from your code. And this basically looks like this, and you're also able to define a default value for this. So if you want this to be automatically selected, you may want to change this to true. And if we now rerun the page, the checkbox is automatically selected. And if you want to use any of the values that you have been creating interactive elements for, you can also just save them into variables. For example, if we just create a value variable and store the result in here, we can use this later on to further manipulate our data frame or whatsoever. So for example, if we put Streamlit right here, instead of just only displaying the text box, we could just output the value, and we would see that either the checkbox has been selected or not. So there's just a Boolean value in here, and you're able to work with this later on. So another quite cool option is the radio button, which basically allows the user to select a value from a variety of options, but only one singular value. So for example, this here takes in a label as well, and then you can provide just some options here. And if we rerun this, you can see that there is the label being displayed, and on the right side, you have the options that you may select from, and the button just automatically jumps towards the option you selected. And there's also some formatting options. So for example, you could just specify that you want this bar to be horizontal and put that equal to true, and then it will be rendered a bit differently so that it just looks a bit nicer. Oh. Save and run. Exactly, so this would be the horizontal formatting, for example. Then there's also some select boxes where the user again is able to just select from a variety of options. It's specified exactly the same way, but instead of radio, you just call st.selectbox, and basically you have a drop-down menu of options here to just choose your options from. Then there's also a multi-select option where the user can just select multiple options from this drop-down list here. So again, you're able to just input the option list here. Additionally, you could define some default values, which should already be pre-selected. So if we just add an array in here and say that option 2 should already be selected, this will once again already be pre-selected. But here you would have the option to just select multiple values. And in your codes, we have already provided some examples, which we will not dive into here, as this would pretty much break our time limit. But maybe you can have a look at the cool stuff you can do with, for example, filtering the columns of your data frame and displaying a chart accordingly. This is all in your codes on the machines. Exactly. So if you want to select a different integer value from a range of values, basically, you would be able to add a slider into your dashboard, and you can basically just call st_slider. You can give some arguments like a minimum or maximum value, or for example, a step value, meaning that you will only increase the number within those steps. So for example, if I put 5 here and then just use the slider will jump in steps of 5, and this basically just returns any numerical value. And what's really cool about this is if you pass a default value here, you can, instead of passing a singular value, you can also pass a tuple of values. So for example, if I put 25 and 75 here, we now have 2 default values, and this basically turns our slider into a double slider. So you can use it from both sides to specify a minimum and maximum value.
And then all of this, you can just store them in a value, and then you can use this value.
Exactly. This is just for all of this. It's the same. You can just save it into a variable and use it later on. For the options, you usually get a string representing the option you've selected. So if I select option 1, you have a string saying option 1, which you can use to do a comparison or search within your data frame. And for example, for those ranges here, this would just return an integer, so a number that you can actually work or calculate stuff with. And lastly, you can take really interactive input from the user, so something like free text values or custom numbers that the user can input. And there's some predefined functions here, such as text input, number input, or date input, for example. Or if you want to have a huge text that should be inputted, you can use a text area. And on the right here, you can once again see what the result looks like. And the user is basically just able to type any text here. Or select a date using a provided date picker right here. Exactly. So now we can have a look at the different layout components that Streamlit provides. And basically the first thing that you'll be able to do is to write some stuff to the sidebar that we can see on the left of the screen here. So if we basically, instead of using any command that we've seen before, instead of calling st.header itself, we can now call st.sidebar.header and just write our content to the sidebar. And any of the elements we have discussed before can be just added there for further customization. So for example, if we put an info box there and a double slider here again, you just have it on the sidebar. Then you're also able to add tabs to Streamlit, meaning that you can have some content on one page and different tabs to switch around in between those contents. And you basically just do this by calling st.tabs here. Then you can provide some labels for those different tabs and just store them in variables. And afterwards, you will be able to define a with block where you can say just say with my tab 1, I want to render a header that just outputs that this is the tab 1. But you would also be able to add different elements down here. For example, another info box that just says hello or similar things, or you could plot something, and this would only be displayed within this first tab here. So until now, we have only outputted different values below each other, and every time we called some Streamlit function, it just outputs it below one another. If we now want to put stuff next to each other, we can basically just define columns here, and we can specify an amount of columns and just render the different columns just like the tabs before next to each other. Another cool feature are the containers within Streamlit, which allows us to place any content out of the actual order we define it in the code. So maybe you want to have a plot at the very top of your page, and below it you want to have some inputs. So this would theoretically not be possible without containers, because you need to get the user inputs first in order to draw the plots. So if you want to accomplish this, you can just use different containers, and then you can basically get the user inputs at first and render the plot above. And as you can see here, we just defined two containers right below each other. And if we output the numbers 1, 2, and 3 afterwards into different containers, we see that the elements here are ordered out of order on our web page, actually. And the last layouting option that Streamlit provides is basically an expander, which we can just use to hide large texts behind such a header here, and you can just open and close this basically as you want. Exactly, and you can just do this by again saying with st expander, and then you could also provide a default value here and just put any content into the expander itself. And the last part we want to talk about before we go into tasks where you can try to use those elements yourself is the caching function, which Dario has already mentioned in the beginning. This would be useful if you have large amounts of data that you need to load every time with huge workloads or whatever. You could basically define this within a cached function so that you do not have to re-execute the same code over and over again and rerun it over and over again. So we tried to simulate this by defining some sort of wait time for our data frame loading. And basically you can see on the right side, we're loading quite a huge data frame, which is still our Titanic data frame. And once this has been completed, we can just output the data frame has been loaded successfully, and we can basically have a look at the data frame. But now the problem is every time we reload the page, the same loading has to reoccur every time. And in order to prevent that, we can basically just add this st cache annotation, which we can see here, to our loading function, which we have defined. And once this is in place, the data will be cached once it has been loaded the first time. So the first time it will have to run again and just load the data. But if we now, once this has been finished, just quickly and easily. And this concludes the different elements that we wanted to provide you with for Streamlit. And now we have prepared some tasks that Kilian would probably want to introduce to you.
Yes, exactly. I mean, since we only have practically 10 minutes, yeah, I guess we will also, I will introduce it here, and I guess you can also try it at home. Also, I mean, one thing which I remember now, in case you still have problems with installing Streamlit, I remember that if you have an older Python version, there's some problems, because I had the same and I Googled it, and apparently an older Python version can sometimes cause problems. So yeah, I mean, just try that out, and as posted in the Piazza, if you can't make it work, and we will try to find a solution together. But yes, for our task, what we practically just wanted to do, we distributed it into yeah, 2 parts. You can just open, yeah, in the files we provided this task1 py. We also already provided, you can see below the solutions, but obviously we recommend you to do it first alone, else, yeah, there's obviously not a real learning effect, but yeah, you already have the solution to check if you did it correctly. But what we want you to do is to practically, this is already the done page. So like the user, I will already type in a ticker here, what we want you to create is like a dashboard which consists of 3 parts, which is like first this ticker input field, so a user can just like input like a ticker, or like for you those, I mean, I guess everybody should know what a ticker is, but yeah, it's just a practically short name for like a stock company which you can search. So you can type in here your ticker, and yeah, that's practically the first part you should add. Then the second part is this data frame which you should yeah, just add below practically. And the third part is this plot according, which practically shows the stock price for a period of 1 year. I will also shortly show you this in the code. So yeah, like in the lecture, we gave you the basic structure already. And yeah, practically for the first part, this info box, you just need to add an info box here. And then for the second part, this data frame, you need to just add here the data frame. And the third thing is that you need to plot the whole data or the data frame, and that would be done here. And we already gave the recommendation, and yeah, as we said, the solution you are already provided with, so you can then on later check if you did it correctly. The second task is just practically advanced, but builds up on the same. I will again show you how it's supposed to look like. Well, let me first show you, like at the moment, the problem which we still have is if a user doesn't type in anything here, you see there's like an ugly error, which is not really nice for a user. So what we want you to do, and like that's the first thing, but also what is the problem if a user types in something wrong here, then like same thing happens again. You will get an error message, which is not that user friendly. What we want you to do is practically add a functionality that if something wrong is typed in, there will be this ticker not found. And if there's nothing typed in, so if the user opens this page, here's a little info box here, which just tells them to enter something in the text box above, so that it's just more user friendly and nothing unexpected can happen. Coding wise, this is the task 2py, so this is basically the structure for this. And there again, I will not show you this now because then you see the solution for the first part, but practically you just need to, like we also like here, told you where to add the code. You just need to add the functionalities. And then as the last task, what we want you to do is to add, so let's look for Apple here. We want to like add a functionality, like this is a select slider, so that the user can just practically, for this chart, change the time period and drag it however he wants. And then this chart adjusts accordingly. This is like practically the third part of the second task. But all this is also in the presentation described and in the code commented. So just try this out at home. And
you also have a nice cheat sheet.
True. And we have a very nice cheat sheet. So we know this was most likely a lot for like one session, which is hard to remember. So we created this small little cheat sheet where you can see practically all the important functions and also the functions you will need for the task. You can also find this on the documentation on the Streamlit page, but just as a nice reminder, I think this is really nice.